Welcome back to another episode of the FGLI podcast. This episode is a recording of a recent college application webinar we held with high school students. Join us as we reflect on our experiences applying to college and provide advice on how to plan your apps. We discuss how to paint an authentic and multifaceted picture of ourselves on our applications, and how we can use our unique FGLI experiences to stand apart. Wondering what's on the application or how to write your essays? Or maybe what should you do right now as a sophomore or freshman to make sure you're putting the best foot forward? Join us as we discuss all of this and more in this episode of the FGLI podcast.
Alright, and before we get into the depth of this presentation real quick, just use the raise hand function on Zoom. If you're currently a senior and you've already applied early decision or early action. Okay, if you are currently a senior and currently applying through this admission cycle. Okay, if you are a senior and you're planning on taking a gap year, use the raise hand function on your Zoom. All right, if you're a junior who wants to learn more about the college application process. Awesome. And you put your hand down. And then anyone younger than a junior. All right.
Nice.
And we have one more quick poll. If you'll type your name in the chat, and then how confident you feel about the college application process, where 1 is if you're not comfortable. And then do you feel like you know what being a college student looks like, where 1 is no idea, and then 5, you know exactly what to expect. This is just for us to kind of get a gauge on how well this presentation does and how you guys are currently feeling.
I think it's cool that you guys are not seniors yet and learning about applying to college already, because I don't think I really looked into it until right before my senior year.
Alright, so you can go ahead and put yours down, and then we'll keep going. Hopefully give you guys some good information.
Nice.
Just a disclaimer before we do start with the whole presentation, just information. Just a reminder, we are not college advisors or experts on the college application process, and we are relatively removed from the college application process also, since it's been about 4 to 5 years for all of us, and we can only talk about our experiences. And if you guys have any questions at the end also, we are happy to help, and if we can't answer your question, we'll find someone to help you answer your question. Okay, so first to start, what is the college application process? So I'm sure a few of you guys already know what parts of what parts the college application process you have to complete in order to apply for college. So the first one is the personal statement, and this is the overall big statement or essay that you use and you share to the colleges that you want to apply to, in order to kind of encompass who you are as a person and what you have done over the past 4 to 5-ish years in high school. And then also the letter of recommendations, which is basically just letters, which is pretty self-explanatory, which is the letters of recommendation from mentors or faculty or teachers that are recommending you to go to specific colleges. And then activities, which is a list of basically all your extracurricular activities that you've done for the past 4 years, and also any leadership roles, volunteer work, or any work experiences that you have also done. And then also the supplemental essays, which are basically just additional essays that maybe some specific schools may ask you to submit in addition to your personal statement. And also finally financial aid, which is just federal and non-federal aid that you can be given for to help with the school tuition.
Yeah, and then to apply to college, there are essentially 3 different applications you can do. They're all the same application, but all with different deadlines. So first is early action, where you can submit your college application earlier than the regular decision deadline. And this is non-binding, which means if you get accepted to the college, then you're not forced to go there. You're not legally binded to attend. Early decision is when you submit the application early as well, but this one is binding. So if a college accepts you, then that means you are binded to go there. Generally, action and early decision have roughly the same deadline, which I believe is November 1st for most colleges through the Common App. So just keep that in mind. These are both a bit earlier than the actual application deadline. And essentially, it just shows the school that you're like, especially if you're early decision, that you like definitely want to go there if you get accepted. And then for regular decision, this is just the normal application, regular deadline, where you submit the application to the school depending on whichever deadline they specified, and then you'll receive a decision in the spring. For early action, early decision, generally you get those decisions in December. And we don't have it on this slide, but QuestBridge also has their own application that's separate from the Common App or Coalition application. And essentially that is due in early December or late September, which is earlier than both of these, and they have their own process that the QuestBridge website generally outlines pretty well.
All right, so the bulk of your application is going to be this personal statement. We've gone some excerpts and also general tips for you guys. What I'm going to cover is the hook, which is basically what you want to get the admissions committee reviewing your essay to kind of invest in your story. This example starts off their essay by doing a definition and then relating it to their personal life. You can read through it here. They're finding contrast and then realizing there are contrasts to their parents. A great example with a lot of FGLI students may relate to. The main thing about your hook is that it should generally not be in isolation. You should bring it up throughout your essay. So it shouldn't just generally be like a thing to catch attention. You want to make sure it's like a common theme or relation you bring out throughout your essay. So here we have another way to relate that contrast where their parents cared for and raised their siblings, but this person was the one being raised by their oldest sibling. So you kind of get that same uh, hardship in the family and then relating it to that contrast. And then here, I think this is the strongest paragraph. Neither of my parents did well in school, and neither ever planned to go back and get a higher education, but they expected the most out of me. While I hopelessly chased after their expectations, jumping through the hoops that were their standards, I developed love in the face of adversity. I love learning, and chasing a higher education is one of my greatest aspirations, not just my parents' expectation. This is also something important to have you guys in the essay. You also want to like include all like the hardships and kind of like difficult things you had to go through, but also turn it out and make it positive, show that you have a genuine love for learning, why you want to chase your higher education, your goals and aspirations in that regard.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about the conclusion of the personal statement. So the conclusion is essentially equal important as the hook itself. So in this excerpt, the paragraph, I can just read it. So from being a meaningless comeback to a life motto, why not, influenced my perspective on opportunities presented at hand. It allowed me to turn my dreams into reality. Although I'm still learning to overcome my fears, rather than scaring myself by overanalyzing, I'm focused on the beneficial outcomes of taking risks. With this phrase, I'm allowing myself access to the endless possibilities the future may hold. Whether it be riding the tallest roller coaster in history or starting an initiative, I can continue to ask myself, why not? So in this conclusion, or some strengths about it is that definitely there should be more telling than showing in the conclusion because you want to be able to kind of tell the adcoms like what is the big takeaway from the whole personal statement, and instead of having them guess, like you should just kind of like hand it to them on a plate because you don't want them to like kind of like just like I guess um infer what you're trying to tell them. And also having a confident tone is really important because it shows like you know who you are and like why you're writing this personal statement and like if there's a purpose for why you're writing this specific personal statement. And also being concise and specific is also important and like doing less fluffing. And I know that like usually like in the personal statement there should be a balance between being concise while having like artistic I guess like writing involved as well. But I think definitely in the conclusion it should definitely be more concise more than fluffing. And then also just remember to bring it full circle. You can definitely mention like what you mentioned like in the hook here, like just as what Khaliun said, throughout the essay you should be mentioning back and forth of like what like different parts of the essay so it feels more concise and like more put together rather than different aspects of like just like your life just like put into an essay.
Nice. So essentially, if all of that sounds super scary, don't worry, it's not too bad once you get into like the flow of things. But once you start off, it can be very daunting to like figure out what you want to write your essay about. And with like all of these like beautifully crafted like hook and intro, you can look at it and just be like, I don't know how to even start getting to that. So essentially, as you're starting to think about your essay, I think it's perfect that you guys are juniors or below. So you guys have like a lot of extra time to think about this if you'd like to. But essentially for your essay, here are kind of like my 4 steps to go to whenever I'm writing a college essay or any personal statement. So first, you want to think about what you really want to show your college, the colleges that you're applying to. Um, this should be something that you might have not already shown them through the rest of your application. So if it's something that your activities list doesn't mention, or something that doesn't really like your like grades or like academic profile doesn't really translate, then the personal statement is a good way to show the academic like the admission counselors like a different side of you. And for these essays, you want to generally find like a central theme to make it cohesive in order to do what the other prompts are doing, like referring back and forth throughout the essay to the central theme. So like growing up as Figley, for example, or like if you have a specific niche interest, in general, it can be whatever, but it just has to be something that's meaningful to you. You can, to start, you just write as many ideas down as possible. What I did was I just had a Google Doc and I just wrote every single idea, even if I thought it was bad. And I ended up with like a 20-page Google Doc of just random ideas. And then once you start having ideas, you want to start thinking about like specific events or experiences that you've had, and then think about what those events mean to you and how they've shaped you essentially. And then once you have all of this, then that's when you can start doing like the big brain stuff and then like finding a common thread across your ideas. For example, if you have a lot of like different experiences about like taking care of like a family member or like finding resources by yourself in high school as first and low income, then you can kind of tie all of it together as like trying to show the admission counselors that you're like extremely resourceful. And then once you find whatever theme that you want to write about in your essay, then you can start drafting and then rewriting over and over again. And essentially, some things to focus on or are show and not tell, which means you don't want to just flat out say you did this. You want to like write it out in detail. Next, you want to focus on yourself specifically because it's you who's getting accepted to college, not like a family member, not your friend. Third, you want to generally be more positive over negative, which doesn't mean you can't write about negative experiences, but you want to essentially like turn it into like a positive lens for the admission counselors to read. So for example, if you've had to go through a lot of struggles, like taking care of like a family member, for example, instead of like harping on the negative aspect of that, you can like show how you grew from that and how it made you a stronger applicant. And then last, essentially the college application process in general, and especially the personal statement, is like a self-reflection exercise. So as you're writing, you want to think to yourself, how have these experiences made me grow as a person? And then why do you want to share these experiences with the college admission people? And we also have a link here on the slides that we'll send out later about how to write a good college application essay from QuestBridge. Their essay is a little different from the Common App or the Coalition application, but the same ideas are present. And then this is just a quick example. I went through all of this already, but essentially for drafting, I guess like a general like layout of like how much of the essay you should be focusing on each section. So this was from my essay, for example. The intro was not as much as big of a part of the essay as the rest of the body, which were like 37, 35% respectively. And then the conclusion was also pretty small, but you want the conclusion to be essentially, like Emily said, like a condensed form of the main takeaways, and then you want the meat of your essay to be your experiences and your reflections on your experience.
Okay, so the next part of the app or just the college application is the activities list, and this is just an example from one of the students at Penn. They were very nice to lend us their list of activities from when they were a senior. So you can kind of see that when they do list their activities, it's very concise and gets to the point, and like in terms of descriptions, it's very what's the word, like very substantial, where it's essentially telling you like what they did at each activity, and also um it doesn't have to be in full sentences, and also it uses numbers to show the impact that the student has had, like during their time or like during that activity, and also in the different I believe, I don't know how it is now, but I believe that in the Common App you can also put your different positions in like a separate line, but I'm not sure anymore. But I think that's what the person did here. But yeah, so overall the main takeaway is just when you're writing down your activities list, I essentially would start with just like listing everything that you do for that club or like the activity that you do, and then also just like main events that you have, like, you know, taken like leadership roles in and stuff like that, and also just important numbers, and then being able to kind of condense that and figure out which activities that you have done in that activity is the most important. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so for the activities, in general, learning how to rank the activities, just be mindful about how, I guess, how committed you are to these activities, and like the types of awards that you receive for them, and how it fits into your the story that you're telling, like whether it's in your personal statement or also in your supplemental essays. So whatever ties into your personal statement the best, it should be ranked the highest. And essentially, I guess if you don't have activities that completely line up with your personal statement, I would just, I guess, like as the first bullet says, like kind of like consider the length of commitment and like how much time and effort that you do put into these activities. And I think that's how you would rank them, and like the importance in terms of like how you perceive the importance of the activities, rather than like what you think the adcoms would think is the most important activity out of all of them. And also, if you do not have anything on your activity list, that is very much okay. You can definitely put non-conventional extracurriculars. They also count. Anything that basically just takes up a relatively large amount of time, such as like what Peter mentioned, like taking care of your relative, or even just like tutoring your sibling, like taking care of them, like driving them back and forth from school and activities, and also translating for your parents and etc. Because as FGLI students, sometimes we don't have time to do more quote unquote conventional activities or extracurriculars because we have other responsibilities that we need to attend to.
Just to add to that real quick, Penn Admissions is like trying to find a way to reach FIGLY students better, and they're specifically talking about how those non-conventional activities tie into your activity list. Just add on like include those, talk about those, even if it's not like the same as like being president of NHS or anything, it's equally as important.
Nice. And just to go over the two different financial aid applications that um, most colleges either use the FAFSA or the CSS profile. Penn uses both, unfortunately. But essentially, the FAFSA is for consideration of federal student aid, and I believe this is what you fill out for the Pell Grant specifically, but Penn also uses it to calculate, as well as other colleges, calculate your financial aid package. Some important deadlines are for the 2025-2026 application, which I don't think anyone here will be filling out, but generally every year for the FAFSA, you want to complete it by late June, though you want to complete it as soon as possible. June is the deadline, the absolute latest you can complete it, but essentially the earlier you can complete it, the more money you can get, which is always good. And then September 13th, or around like early September, is generally the time if you have like any corrections or updates to your FAFSA. The CSS profile is another application that's through College Board that also helps colleges decide non-federal institutional aid. And it's essentially the deadlines are essentially dependent on whichever schools you're applying to, and not all the schools participate. So Penn does participate, but other schools might not use the CSS profile. And for the CSS profile, generally there's a application fee, from what I remember, to complete it. Though some colleges have like a code, if you qualify, that essentially waives that fee. So make sure you're not paying for more than you actually need to. And also, as you're completing the FAFSA, there are like a lot of different documents that you might need. So it can be a little stressful, like figuring out like all of the right numbers to fill out. But for a lot of it, you just like kind of look things up. The FAFSA has some recommendations and like help for it, but everyone's financial financial situation is unique, so it can be a little difficult just to let you guys know.
Just to add on to that, I know someone that was bigly that had difficulty filling out the FAFSA and also the CSS profile because they had a non-responsive guardian. And if that is like a case for one of you guys, or like if you guys don't have like all the information of like finance, like all your financial information, that's also okay because FAFSA and CSS or like College Board, they do know that there are unique circumstances and that just being able to fill out these applications to your best ability is also important, and like you can be able to like note that like you weren't unable to like get like all the information that you need to fill it out completely because again FAFSA is a government application, so they still have access to I think your IRS, so like they will be able to access some of the information if you're not able to get it.
So, this will be a little further in the future, but once you guys get into college, what is it like? So, the first thing that you'll probably notice as a freshman is how much more freedom you have of how you spend your time, since classes are not from like a normal like 8:30 or whenever school starts, like 8 to 3 block. You have they're essentially like interspersed, and then you can register for classes at different times. You essentially have a lot more free time with how you map out your schedule, which is the first kind of like culture shock that I experienced going into college. And you also have more responsibilities in the sense of you have to figure out when to eat. You have to figure out when to do laundry and all of the other like errands that you would have to do while living alone. And you also have to deal with roommates if you have roommates, for better or for worse. And then you also would need to learn how to budget and spend your own money as well. For Penn, since they do meet 100% of your like financial aid needs, sometimes they can give you a refund, and it'll be up to you to figure out how to budget that refund if you have to buy textbooks. There are some programs at some colleges that help like offset the cost of textbooks as well, but generally you have to figure out how to budget all of this stuff. A cool thing about college is you can meet a lot of really cool people, especially FGLI students and mentors as well. So part of it is learning how to communicate with these different individuals. So you get to meet generally a lot of different people your first year because everyone wants to make new friends. But you also get to meet a lot of professors who could be in the fields that you are interested in. Um, Another like less talked about aspect of being first gen specifically at college is this duality of your life at college versus back home. So for me, for example, being at college felt kind of like a dream for me, where you're living your life at college, you have your own like set of friends, taking classes, doing like everything. But then once I went back home, you kind of like got hit by like the reality of just being back home again. So for some of you, you might relate to that. For some, you might not. But just to put that out there as a pretty common FIGLY experience as well. And then lastly, when you're at college, you essentially have a lot of room to grow as a person, and you learn how to be more confident about yourself as well as you're meeting all these new people, doing new things as well.
And then also won't be applicable for a bit, but just things to think about. Some advice when you transition to college is that you shouldn't be afraid to ask for help. Take advantage of all the resources at your school, specifically office hours. I remember my year, I literally went to like every single office hour of all my classes, even if I felt like I was doing okay, because that's the way you get to connect with other peers at your institution and gain mentors through the professors. It's normal not to get it right the first time. A lot of students, especially if you're going to school like Penn, you'll like fail your first midterm, and that's fine. Like it's built in, there are like drops in it. And it's also normal to not get like living on your own immediately, right? I know a lot of my first gen friends went home often if they lived in the suburb area, and it's okay. Acknowledge the small wins that you have and just have fun, but also study.
Just to add on to that, I feel like this advice is probably applicable to like you guys now. Honestly, I think the earlier you start of like asking for help, the better, because I'm still kind of struggling asking for help once in a while, like specifically when it comes to like professors or just mentors in general, because I guess like generally there is like this mentality of being like a FICLY student and wanting to be able to do things on your own, but sometimes like you should be able to like just train that muscle to like ask for help, and it definitely will come in handy in the future.
And the worst people can say is no. And if that's what you get an answer, then that's okay. That it doesn't mean that um like you shouldn't ask for like help in the future. It just means that that specific person that you asked for help might not be available at that time, or they might just not know or have the necessary skills to help you. And then we just wanted to wrap up our college life overview slash college application overview of some of our recommended episodes from the FIGLY podcast. Generally, these episodes just illustrate like the broad FIGLY experience while being in college. And essentially, the first episode that we have here is with one of the directors of the Cultural Resource Center at Penn, and she essentially goes into a lot of detail about the different cultural challenges that she experienced while applying to college and then being at college that she had with her family. So we highly recommend this episode.
Yeah, the second episode is a conversation that I had with three freshmen at Penn who are involved with student organizations. We covered a lot of topics from like joining clubs to balancing schoolwork to how they interact with their family after coming to Penn. And it's really nice, kind of uh, really like real conversations peer to peer about what it's like to be a freshman.
And then last episode we have is also with three freshmen who are currently at Penn, and they talk about a lot of their first year experience navigating everything, and also go into conversations about like how they kind of like grapple with the idea of fate, whether or not to think of fate as like a prominent factor in your experience while being accepted to college, and imposter syndrome, all of that stuff. But yeah, they also talk a lot about just their first impressions of college. Okay, cool. So that was essentially the end of our slide. If you want to follow us on Instagram or our Spotify slash YouTube slash Apple podcasts, we're the FIGLY podcast on all of those platforms. This is our website as well. And if you have any questions but you don't know who to ask, that's a super common experience being Figly. We have a question and answer form. So if you don't know who to ask and just want to like shout into the ether, if you need help, then we can try to answer these questions on our Instagram. Or also, if we don't know the answer, then we can also ask people who might know the answer. Um, but yeah, if you guys have any questions right now, just feel free to unmute or put them in the chat, and then we can try our best to answer them.
And we'll also post these slides as well for future reference.
Yep. So our first question is, are sports good for colleges? Um, Anyone want to take that? I can also take it too. Okay. So in terms of sports, generally I would treat it as any other like activity. So in general, whenever you're deciding for activities, what activities to do, I think my best rule of thumb is to just do activities that are meaningful to you, because the more meaningful the activity, the more you're able to write about it, and the more you're able to like, you don't want doing the activity to feel like a chore, and you'll probably spend more time doing it. So if you are really into sports, I would recommend just like doing it, and then not necessarily as like a application booster, but just because you enjoy doing that sport, and then naturally being able to put it on your application or write about it in your activities list, or if you want to write about it in your personal statement, then um, it would be good. Next question. What should we do to stand out from others with similar applications?
That's a great question because what you have is like your activity list and then your like rank and then your GPA, and you can have similar stats to thousands of people when you're applying to colleges. That's why it's really important to be authentic in your personal essay. You can take hints and like or tips how to craft it, but you really want it to be your individual story. And it sounds cliche, but admissions committees are good at like kind of detecting who's being authentic versus who's kind of writing a statement that they feel like makes their stats better. You can't really change that, but you can show behind like who's the person behind this application. You know, so
Another big thing, or the advice that I was given when I was applying to college is when you do write your personal statement and also your supplemental essays and like your list of activities. I think if you were an adcom and you were like looking at your own application, what are like the few characteristics that they want, like you would want them to take away from it? So like if they were to refer you, like for example, like me, they're like, oh, like Emily, like what do you think about Emily? And then like, oh, it's the applicant that's blank and that's blank and that's blank. And like what are like the I guess like I guess like a rule of thumb, like what are the three big I guess like things that you want them to take away from you? It's like, oh, is it this person that does this activity, or is it this person that's, figly, or like this person that's like passionate about like, I don't know, like baseball or something like that. And it's just like those like main things. It's like just when you are crafting your application, just be very cognizant of how you're presenting yourself and like what you're highlighting. But
Hmm. Yeah, I think in general, like Khaliun said and Emily said, just being like yourself and just showing people what you are passionate about, because that'll probably A, be the easiest thing to write about because you're passionate about it, and then B, it really comes across in the essays, just because the college application process isn't just looking at your, like transcript, your SAT scores, etc. The personal statement and activities portion are kind of what distinguish you as an individual for them. And also, ADCOM just means admission committee for anyone confused. Um, Next question. Do you think that our application should be generalized or future major focused? Um, oh, you want to take
honestly,
that?
typically like generalize. You want to talk about you yourself as a person. Most of the time, the prompts they're not necessarily like there'll be a few where it's like, what's your future career? Like, what career are you interested in? What major? Like when you do the application, you have to choose a major. But a lot of these admissions committee know that like plans change. You come in wanting to do something, and then you can do a complete 180. So it's more so showing who you are as a person, what you've achieved,
Hmm.
and why you're seeking like higher education.
Yeah, I think also if you do, I guess like while like by the time you're writing your essays and you do know what you want to do in college at that like specific moment, I think it's not bad to show that as well and like being able to kind of like show like how your activities or like your passions fit within your I guess like future aspirations and like I guess like the major that you want to do in that specific college. Yeah, I think honestly like if you do have that I think it's worthwhile to like write about it, but if you don't, like also don't stress too much about it because you guys are like 17, 18-year olds like when you're applying, so it's like they're like colleges like don't expect you to like know what you want to do for the rest of your life.
Hmm. Yeah. And also, I think in terms of like the personal statement, it could be really strong to kind of tie like if you do discuss if it is related to your personal statement, you can like tie it back into what you want to do in the future. But also, you don't want to like focus your entire personal statement on that just because you want to focus on what you did and not what you want to do. Next question. Are there any other activities outside of school and volunteering that you recommend for us to do that'll help us get into Penn specifically?
I wouldn't say activities, but really research the schools that you're interested in. I know a lot of people in their Penn applications would specifically name a club or program that interested them. And that kind of highlights to the admissions committee that you are actually interested in attending this university because there's like a politics behind it because obviously they want to like accept the best candidates, but also like they want to ensure the people they accept do come to their school. So if you put that effort into really like researching the schools, Penn has a public website I think called Penn Clubs. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure you'd be able to like look through it even if you're not a Penn student. And you can kind of look through and you can name those clubs. You can name like the programs we have.
And also just don't name random ones too. Like be able to like
Yeah, like no.
be able to like connect it back to like why you're interested in them and like why you think that like the school I guess it's like going back to your question, I think um don't be super duper like don't emphasize on like oh like what specific activities that you should be able to do but I think like in terms of like the essays while you're writing them show why throughout like the essays like why you're able to be a good fit for the school and why is this school a good fit for you as well. I think that that's really important because in the end like colleges aren't out to get you and like if you do accept you if colleges do accept you like I guess here's Penn specifically, that means they do know that like you'll be able to thrive here because of the culture and like the mindset you have and like the passions you have and like maybe like their resources would be helpful in helping you achieve your goals. I think definitely um I think I'm a firm believer that like whatever happens happens and like you'll get into the places that like you're meant to be. But
Next question. Um, what are some specific ways to stand out in college app specifically as a Figley student?
I think when I was applying, I when I started applying and started writing my essays, I didn't realize I was a Figley student until I started applying, and I was like, oh, I could like talk about this I guess like identity that I have, and then I think when you do what was it called? Like standing out right from
Hmm.
other Figley
Yeah.
students, I think there definitely is a shared experience amongst Figley students, but I think the way that like in the end, it's like your life is unique from everyone else's lives, and like there's if you just write like I guess it's like cheesy to say, but if you like write authentically and like be able to kind of just like show your own experiences, like being able to like be honest about like what you have gone through, um, and like what you've learned from it, I think that's like the only thing that you can do because in the end, if you are authentic, that's how you can like stand out from other ones because like you'll inevitably be different from other Figley students.
Yeah. Let's just like relate those like spell it out. Because when you just say first gen alone, you're like their first gen technically is also defined as like parents who didn't get a US education or like graduate from US school. You might be in that situation or you might be a student whose like parents never graduated from high school. And it's important to like say that. Like I'm pretty sure the application will ask for that, but to show that how that manifested in your life versus just trying like add in as many like keywords or adjectives, show the experiences behind it and how it made you you.
Nice. I agree with all of that as well. What should I include in my essay? Should I bring up grades and what I'm good at?
I would say with grades, there's usually like an additional information section with your essay. Like we said, you
Hmm.
want it to be positive and you want to like show who you are as a person and you're not just grades or a GPA. So I think it's really important to try to like, and it's not a lot of words either. You want to make sure you use all those words to show who you are and
Hmm.
show that story rather than like, oh, I got like, I did bad in my freshman year class. Like that's something you could address also in your application.
Yeah.
I think especially with COVID now, there's like definitely a section that's like, oh, how did the pandemic influence or impact you, or like any other unforeseen circumstances that you want to note.
Hmm. Yeah. I think in general for grades, if your personal statement is like, I wouldn't necessarily also include it in your personal statement just because you have other areas of the application to include it in. But also you can kind of like, I don't know, if you're writing about your Figly experience and then you're like, oh, you're in your transcript, you're like, oh, the grades aren't looking so hot like in one semester. It kind of like intangibly like, oh, that's why or something like that. But you can also like expand on that as well
Yeah.
in the additional information section.
I think to emphasize what Peter said, I think the colleges have been like I feel like they've been doing this for a really long time. So I feel like they haven't perfected the application process, but I will say I feel like they definitely have found like they will give you opportunities to talk about like what you want to talk about in like each part of the process. So I think definitely for your personal statement, use that to talk about yourself and not about like your grades as just what Khaliun said. It should definitely be like about who you are as a person and their aspirations and like what like I guess what are again like back to like what I said earlier, like what are the like main takeaways that you want them to take away after they're done reading your application? Like how do you want them to remember you?
Next question. How do I know what scholarships I am eligible for?
It's just a lot of like elbow grease you have to put into it, I fear. There's a lot of like websites that I'll name all of them. Just off the top of my head, like there's the big one Skates, where it's just generally for like minority students. And then there's also like the Cook Scholarship, and there's also ones that you kind of see, like I'm pretty sure Dr. Pepper has a cool scholarship. You gotta go to like a football game, but it really is just kind of like putting in the research, both like through normal websites, and then I think Reddit's also like a surprisingly good resource for admissions when you're looking at like specific schools, and then like scholarships that apply to your specific like qualifications for it. And then also understanding like financial aid. I think a lot of students when they hear like you got into Penn with like a full scholarship, that's not really a thing. Penn meets all financial aid. So if you need financial aid, Penn will get like the achievement is getting into Penn, not necessarily like it on the full ride. So understanding how some institutions might offer you full rides, how other institutions might not. There's no like general formula for it. Some private institutions do, some public institutions don't. So
And generally, you can also figure out how much financial aid the school will give you on like College Board's like big future database that has like information about all the schools. So if getting into a school that meets like 100% of your financial demonstrated financial aid need is a priority for you, then you can also find all the schools on that. Next question, how can I build a well-rounded application? Slash, what should I do to benefit me in the future? Um, I think in general, like we said before, for like a well-rounded application, you want to show the admissions committee like as many different sides of you as possible that you want to share with them. So if you, for example, if you talk about grades in your personal statement, if you talk about like grades in your activity somehow, if you like just have like a very like um, I don't know what the right word for it, like monotone application, then you're not really showing like yourself completely as like a applicant or a person. So I would just make sure to really what I did was I just had a, like I said before, like a Google Doc and just like went through a little self-reflection process. Um, but essentially, after you do that, you can pick out like the major points of what you want to highlight for the admissions committee. And then from there, you kind of want to make sure your application touches on all of those different points as well.
Yeah. In the space that you'll mainly show that well-roundedness will be like through your supplemental essays. Just because that one big personal essay, you don't have a lot of space, you do kind of want to show like a cohesive story. So make sure your supplemental essays like kind of fit in, but it's not like about the same experience, about the same activity. You can kind of take it, you can view it as like a place like really zoom in on one thing, or you can talk about something like separately entirely, but just make sure it's not like the same
And I also
topic for
feel
your
like in terms of
supplemental.
like, sorry,
Okay.
I feel like also in terms of like the term like well-rounded, I think a lot of people mistaken that as like, oh, if a well-rounded application means like, oh, I do everything. And I feel like a lot of like um college admission people like committees like they don't want to see that anymore, and they do want to see a story behind like and the reasons for why you do certain things and like why you chose to do these specific activities. And like what Haloon said, I think you just need to be able to like portray that like the story behind the activities, and not or like throughout the application, like through your supplemental essays, your personal statement, and rather than just like doing this because you think the admissions like committees will like it. Yeah.
And then to follow up on that for the second question, um, similar thing. Don't do things just because you think people will like it. Do things because you like it. Okay, final couple of questions. Is there anything specifically I should look for in schools when college searching, or anything to avoid?
I feel like when I first started researching a list of schools like that I wanted to apply to, I wrote down all the like basically all the criteria that I would want to look for in a school. And I feel like that's very much like dependent on like the person. But I guess like the general ones, I guess for Philly students is like how much financial aid do they give, or do they give any financial aid at all? I guess another one is like, oh, do they have my major or like programs that I would be interested in? Any like student groups that are also interesting, location, um, what else? Um, I guess like how far away it is from home is also an important one to some people. Like whether it's like in state or out of state. Um, yeah, those are the ones that I can think of off the top of my head. But
Yeah. And once you like have that list, again, I'm bringing it up again, but going on that school's Reddit page, you also get like a good idea of like how the students feel within that school. And also like being okay with going against your family's expectations, especially as a first-gen student. I feel like your family might like to want you to just go to like the state school that they all know, or they might have like kind of unrealistic expectations of like Harvard or bust. Really kind of like go outside of that. Uh, like understand like what schools like the conferences in them. Like I remember like there was a lot of schools that I thought were really prestigious that maybe weren't, or schools I never like thought of that were great. So just really focusing on that research, and then the way you can kind of narrow it down is like as Emily said, kind of look at your needs. Will this school meet 100% of my financial need? Is it within like a car ride of my home? Is it within $100 airplane ticket of my home? So on.
also, just going back to the advice slide about just like being able to like ask for help and stuff, I think this definitely applies to like um just like researching schools. And like if you still don't have like a good idea about like what the school is like, honestly I feel like a lot of students at that school, like if you do reach out and like somehow find them on like LinkedIn or something, I think, or even people from your high school too, like if they do go to that school, like I think they would be more likely to like help out and like tell you like what the school is like based off of like a firsthand experience.
And I would also use the like researching schools process for like your own personal benefit as well. It is helpful for the supplemental essays to really like personalize it to each school, but also you also want to like make sure the school is good for you. Like if there's a specific program that is really cool, you want to like know about it right away and not when you're a junior. Or if there's like any like other specific things about the school, just make sure you like know about it first as well. Just so once you actually are there, which seems like a very long time like to get to, you like hit the ground running and you're like already aware of the different resources that are available to you so you can make the most of your college experience. Okay, last question. Um, what can I do to ease the transition into college?
Yeah. Something I wish I did earlier was really sit down and make a budget because we kind of grew up, like money was always like such a scary thing to deal with. And for the first time in my life, I had like this big chunk of money through my refund, and I was so terrified of spending it. So I like was avoiding experiences. I was like avoiding doing things with my friends, and making a budget actually like helped me justify spending money. This obviously came from like a very like scared place of like not knowing how to spend money and being like scared to do experiences. But I remember I used to like think of it as like, okay, I know like I could make a cheaper meal at home, but I'm gonna view this instead as like a hanging out with friends thing other than like food. So then I could budget differently. Like I might budget like food versus fun differently. And then it helps you kind of lean into like, because everyone deserves the college experience. And then a lot of these schools will help you achieve that through like refunds or other like college dorm activities.
Also, I feel like in terms of like transitioning, it's definitely not a linear transition, and there's definitely going to be like a learning curve when it comes to going from senior living at home to like a freshman at like a new place with like new people and maybe like people that you don't even know at all. So I feel like definitely just give yourself a lot of grace and like be patient with it too, because again, like you won't get it in the first try. So.
Yeah, and then just dovetailing off of the previous point about giving yourself grace, for a lot of FIGLE students, imposter syndrome is a very like prominent emotion and experience. Just like the idea of like maybe the admission committee like made a mistake and my name like slipped through and I'm like not meant to be here. Um, but just know that essentially you're definitely meant to be at that college. And then the admission counselors or committee admitted you because they think that you would be a good fit for that college and they think that you would be able to thrive. So just keep that in mind. And then also know that even if your grades aren't like the best the first year, like even if you aren't able to like get straight A's your first semester, that's not necessarily a reflection of like how good you are as a student. It's more essentially like in college, your freshman year grades are more of a reflection of how good your high school was. So if you look at other students in the class and they're like excelling, that might just because their high school offered like 500 like AP Chem classes or whatever, or like they have like higher like they took like multivariable calculus in college or in high school, and while you might just be starting out in that class for the first time, so just kind of like keep that in mind as well. If you're seeing other people who are like magically doing super well in these classes, it might just be because they might have came from like a high school that just like allowed them to just like know all of this material beforehand or just better prepared them. But as you go through college, what matters is you're able to get all the help you need from the different centers. I know Penn has a wine garden tutoring center that essentially pairs people up with tutors as well to get help, but other colleges might have a similar program as well. So just making sure you get all the help you need. Don't be like afraid to ask your professors for um, advice, help, extensions even. And yeah, just go to office hours is my last point. Office hours are essentially like time that the professor sets aside to go over like any questions students might have in the class. So you can come with questions to those office hours, or you can also just go if you're really interested in what the professor is doing to ask for like advice, like career advice as well. But yeah. Okay, thank you again, everyone, for coming to our webinar. We hope it was helpful. Emily will put in a link in the chat right now for the feedback and question form. And just make sure to fill that out so we have your email and then we can send over the slides to you. It is pretty short, but essentially we want to get more feedback just to make the webinar better and then hopefully distribute it to more students as well. And then I hope you all have a good winter break, and happy holidays, happy New Year.
Thank you.
Yeah, of
Thanks.
course. Bye.
Bye.